Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I am Clayton.
Well, there's no one sitting to your left or right because we're all technically virtually sitting. I guess I'll go. I'm the voice of Kyle Perkins. My body is detached.
I'm definitely still Jordan.
How do I know?
You're just gonna have to take my word for it, I suppose.
So before we get started, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliar@gmail.com. I'm sorry, I was incorrect on the email address. It's alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook, and you can help us out at Patreon at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia, where any help you would be able to give us would be greatly appreciated. Today, our topic is we're going to be talking about secrets, intrigues, mysteries, and disseminating information. So, Jordan, can you keep a secret?
Yeah, probably.
Well, that's a problem as a player.
Well, you guys know I'm still listening, right?
Oh, fuck.
Yes,
Look, tensions are high. It's like day, what are we on, 10 of the quarantine? We're all losing our minds here a little bit, but we're going to give you some quality podcast content today, or we're going to die trying.
Probably die trying.
I got 13 loaded magazines sitting here on my desk. I'm not gonna die for shit.
Bullets ain't gonna protect you from germs.
Sure it will. I just gotta make sure that I fire before they get within 6 feet of me.
I literally traded some bullets for a parking brake cable, so it was my dad, but still, I gave him some bullets for a parking brake cable for the truck we're working on. It's strange times.
That sounds like a square trade there, yeah.
So secrets, and players are terrible at them. The reason why players are terrible at them is because in real life, you're good at secrets if you keep them. But in role-playing games, you're terrible at secrets if you keep them, because if the secret never gets out, it's never a part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, unintentional secret keeping, you know? Someone learns something and never tells anybody about it, not thinking. Some players are going to operate even though they metagamingly know that information, but they're not going to have their player act as if they do, and that's going to cause some problems. But then you also have jackasses who just will not tell the snippet of information that was beamed directly into their brain, for example.
Yeah, this is part of a bigger category of a problem of player information. Some things are secret, some things are explicitly said, and it's just going to be forgotten in the next session because of note keeping or whatever. But yeah, I'm terrible at it. I'll be the first to admit. You called me out, Clayton. You're right.
So I think part of, I don't think it's entirely the player's fault for not being able to recognize that, oh, this is a game that we're all playing, and in a game like this, secrets are meant to get out, because the real world does not operate like that. And if you're coming into a game, you need to actually let somebody know that this is the game we're playing, where if nobody knows the secrets, then it's just wasted game material that never comes up in the game and nobody gets to play with it.
When you entrust it to a particular player, it then becomes a resource, right? So it kind of changes its purpose, or at least one of its functions, from being a part of the narrative background of the entire thing to being a resource that the character can spend when most opportune for them to do so. So I think that's probably where the rub is, right? I always think of it sort of like luck points or bennies or whatever. It's like I got this one thing, this point of inspiration or whatever you want to call it, that I can spend when most opportune, but when are you going to know when that time is, So you wind up saving it till you have to.
Yeah, and you end up saving it forever because you don't know when the most opportune time is going to be. It's like every time I play Final Fantasy games, I get to the end of the game and I've got 99 mega elixirs because I didn't think I was in a situation where I really needed to use it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's par for the course.
I mean, I've been in situations where I, as the game master, have like told a player a secret and then, in the course of the game, brought up a situation where I'm like, okay, this is the perfect time for this to come out. And I'm staring down the player who knows the secret, and the player is just sitting there with a big old grin on their face because they know a secret that none of the other players know. But in the back of their mind, they're like, oh, I need to save this because it's juicy now, but it's going to be even better here in the next scene, or whenever it's going to be even more critical. I'm going to just lay this bomb out. Whereas I'm the game master sitting there, like, trying to will this person to change their mind and bring this up right now, because this is when it needs to come out.
So what's the solution then? Put like an expiration date on a secret? Have some kind of like, maybe the player character is not the only reservoir for this information, and that, you know, if they wait around for an NPC or an enemy or an ally to divulge, then, you know, it's going to be bad for them. You put a clock on them like that, or what?
Well, I'm kind of against having a player or an NPC eventually divulge the secret, because then it's not that player sharing what they know. But on the flip side of it, it's probably the best way in which to do that, because the player's just going to sit on it forever. If an NPC brings it up, even the player who knows the secret, they've got the smug satisfaction of, yeah, I already knew that.
What I'm saying is, though, like, let's say that the secret is, like, you know who murdered someone. You, like, saw a murder, and you were there and saw it, and you also saw, you know, some other NPC across the way who was also spying from the shadows. So you two, you know, are the only ones that know this thing. And maybe you know about, maybe the other witness knows that you saw it too, maybe they don't, but one way or the other, an added bit of information that the player character has in addition to the primary secret is that they are not the sole, what's the word I'm looking for? The sole witness to this thing. You know, they don't have an exclusive right to this information. So maybe then they're like, you know, nervous. Oh, when is this person gonna, you know, spill the beans or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And, yeah, I think that's a great idea of making sure that the player knows that this is a finite resource that they have, but they're not the only one who has this finite resource. And the first person who uses it is the only person who's going to be able to gain the benefit of using it.
So what's a good example of this coming up in a game? You know, what's a time that this has happened to you, Clayton?
I'm racking my brain. I'm having a hard time thinking of a specific instance because it's been a while since I've had something like this happen. Like in our Hunter game a few years ago now, where Jordan, we did a secret where Jordan, your character was high on, I think, mushrooms or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Am I remembering that correctly?
I think so. Is this where I was playing the Egon character?
Right.
Yeah.
I actually shared a secret with everybody around the table except for you. And that secret was, I had a special signal that I would do something with my hand, and whenever I did that, everything I was describing was something that only your character was experiencing.
So wait a minute, you gave a hand signal, and when you talked while the hand signal was active, the things you were describing were only in Jordan's character's trip, like in his mind?
Yes, I took every player aside and said, hey, for the next half an hour, every time I do this thing with my hand, it means that the thing I am describing is not actually happening. It's things that's going on in Jordan's mind. Everybody play along.
Oh, that's hilarious. And it's perfect that the audio just cut out right as you were revealing that. I still can't know.
Did I miss that session? I don't recall that happening.
I don't remember, but it was everything that happened on basically the car ride home coming back from in character from Jackson County whenever you were done with that case.
I might have missed that session. There were also some things that happened to KD's character that I found about later on. But anyway, that's great. That's hilarious. Very good use of that.
Yeah, that's another instance where there was a secret going on. KD his character had basically a demon possessing him, and he was trying to hide it from everyone. And I was having trouble like finding ways to give clues to everybody else that something else was going on, because he was constantly like just kind of brushing it aside, like being totally in character, just kind of brushing it aside, like saying it was nothing, until it got to the point where I had the demon take full control and like do the carving on his forehead. And then I took Kyle into the next room, wrote on his forehead with a washable marker some words that he had to wait until he got back to the group before he could find out what it said.
I don't think you ever told me that, Clayton. I don't remember you ever revealing to me that that whatever was going on in that trip was something that only I was seeing.
No, I don't think I ever did tell you that it was just the trip.
Well, so I think there's a lot of room, and we've all experienced in our games, bringing players into the other room one at a time or as a small group or whatever, as a way of the logistical dissemination of secrets. I think that's pretty effective. It certainly sets a mood in addition to allowing you to pass on secret information. Do you guys have any other methods you like to use to handle secret sharing?
Well, in your Wanderers game, we were all sending text messages to you.
Yeah, that happens a lot. That's one of my few times where I'm totally okay with having phones around if people are good about just using them for in-game secret communication. I love that.
I've kind of fallen out of love with that one, because I think what seems to happen there is that it's easy to lose track of what's going on, or at least that's my perception of it. Like, you got too many different communication streams, and, you know, text is somewhat unreliable, and also since you don't have, like, the whole transcript of the thing there for review, then you'd have to go back and look at all these different texts between all these different people, and it also is just such a slow form of communication that, like, it really throttles down the pace of the game when you're sitting there in person, you know, waiting on you to respond to, 5 texts as fast as you might be able to text. It's still like, you know what I mean?
Well, it's just an updated form of the whole passing notes thing, and passing notes is just as dreadfully slow.
Yeah. I don't think there's a good solution as of right now. Maybe there will be at some point, but, I mean, I haven't had much experience yet with the online gaming thing. Maybe it's easier if everybody's sitting around with their laptop with multiple different chats going, but thumbs are not as fast as all your fingers.
Winky face. I think we're all going to have to get used to remote gaming here for a while. And although we will be doing an episode on this, don't worry, we'll talk about this more later. I'd love to do an episode on the ins and outs and, how to make it less like pulling your own teeth out with a rusty pair of pliers. But to get back to the topic at hand, I guess you mentioned passing notes. I mean, that's classic. I've only had a couple of DMs do that. Very rarely has that happened, and it is a little bit. It has the same like ooh factor as pulling a player out of the room, which is fun. You get a note, like, whether they mean to or not, the person sitting next to you is probably going to kind of lean over or, like, dart their eyes towards the note and then go, like, ah, fuck, and, like, look away. Or they'll fucking try to see it if they're a dickhead. But that's a fun one. I tend to kind of forget that I can do that in the era of texting. But I think that note passing, I guess that won't be happening much in our games right now. It is just as much of a time sink as pulling out your phone and sending a text message. But I wonder if people are less socialized to, somebody pulls out a phone when you're hanging out in a group, when you're playing a game. A lot of people will just kind of ignore that person. It's like a social cue to be like, they're on their phone. Well, they're going to be checked out for a minute. Forget about them. But if the DM or a player pulls out a piece of paper, rips it down the middle, and starts writing a note on it, that almost brings attention to you instead of putting this like veil of, invisibility over you by pulling out your phone and typing something on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely understand the appeal, but here's why I don't pass notes anymore. One, my handwriting is shit. The player is not going to be able to read it. If I write it so that the player can read it, it's going to take 4 times as long for me to write the note.
This is true. I've seen you do like symbols and important things that aren't the English language in notes before to great effect.
What do you mean by not the English language?
Well, I
mean just like symbols and stuff like that?
Yeah, you're saying your handwriting is bad, but like, you pass a note to a player, you see this symbol, no one else sees it, and like it's some cool thing, like it's like a little memento, a keepsake.
Yeah, that would be the case in which I'm in favor of it, because it's not something that is then going to be, hopefully it's not going to be then thrown away. It's going to be kept for posterity so that later on when this thing becomes relevant, they can pull it out and say, aha, here it is.
Right.
And I think that's a big key to doing good secrets, is to give something to the player so that they remember that they have the secret to begin with. Because the majority of the time, if the player isn't being smug in the fact that they know a secret and everybody doesn't, more often than not, the thing is happening where the player has just forgotten the secret that they know, and if they've forgotten, the secret is gone.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing worth bringing up here is, what is the purpose of the secret? Like the different kinds of games that you're going to run are going to have you treating secrets differently. Like it's easy to immediately think about like, a murder mystery, maybe like a World of Darkness kind of thing or something like that. But like if you're dealing with that kind of secret, that's one thing. If you're dealing with, like sort of a plot secret in like a more grand thing, like let's say a D&D game or something like that, and it's like some ancient buried secret, something that nobody else knows, you would treat that differently. Or if it's like a political intrigue kind of thing, that, such and such is plotting against the king or whatever, I think all of these things, though they all involve covert information, you might want to handle them differently as a DM, right? Or do you guys think otherwise?
Correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but I think you're talking about like kind of the difference between a secret that one player knows and a secret that all of the players know, but is a secret from the rest of the campaign world. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, that could definitely be part of this, but also I'm just thinking about like kind of the tempo and feel of different kinds of games might have you handling secrets in a different way. Like, yeah, you can do a murder mystery in Dungeons and Dragons, but the game and the system is not really, well situated to do that as well as some other purpose-built things might be. And, how you approach it, like the resources available to the characters are going to be different depending on what the setting is. Like in D&D, they're going to go straight to like magic. They're going to go to Zone of Truth and detect magic and, all these other divination kinds of things. If they're playing in like a more hardcore modern kind of scenario, they're going to do old school detective work and science. And if they're in a, like an eclipse phase or some other kind of sci-fi thing, then they're going to be leaning entirely on, the magical science detection, like pseudo-magical science detection stuff that's available there. But in addition to the resources that the players have at their disposal to figure things out, there's also just kind of the narrative experience that is kind of assumed when you're going to be in these games. You know what I mean? Like a very slow, drawn out investigation in the vein of like Call of Cthulhu would feel pretty weird for like a barbarian who's just there to smash goblins. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the tone and the feel of the game, and probably the game system it's in and of itself, rather than what is going on in a particular session for a game. Is that right?
Right. And I think that the way that the rest of the game has been run, the way that the themes of the story so far, and the established etiquette of the characters in the world are definitely going to shape the way that people interact with mysteries and secrets when they're presented to them. It's going to be a totally different thing if I've been playing, some guy with plate mail and a longsword, and that's how I'm dealing with my problems, suddenly presented with a mystery, versus, well, I've been a Harvard professor of the occult, and now I have a mystery to solve. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and definitely different systems are better for that than others. Like you said, D&D is pretty poor. There is a single investigation skill, and there is a single insight skill to determine whether or not somebody is giving you partial truth, full truth, or some gradient of lies.
Not ideal.
So we've played a few different systems over the years that actually seem like they do pretty well with doing these types of investigative type games where the purpose of the game is for the characters to learn things and then to use that information to propel the plot forward. Let's see, it's been a few months now. We did Night's Black Agents, which is in the Gumshoe system. Gumshoe is entirely built around being detectives of some sort. How did you guys feel like that handled like learning things and applying what you've learned?
It really handled planning well. I remember gathering information and turning that intel into an actionable plan was not tedious. It was actually fun, like a game should be. I don't remember the exact details of how it worked. I just kind of remember the feeling of doing it, if that makes any sense.
Just to refresh, in Gumshoe, you have investigative skills. You have a certain number of ranks in that skill. And whenever you come against a problem, you let the game master know how many points you have in that skill, and however many points in that skill you have determines how much and the quality of the information that you get about whatever you're investigating. So for instance, if you have points in forensics, for instance, and you come across a murder scene, however many points you have in forensics is going to tell the quality and the quantity of the information that you learn from that scene. There's not any rolling involved in it. There might be a spending of those points, but the information that you get is basically guaranteed. You're not going to roll and fail a roll and fail to get the information.
Okay, yeah, I think that is exactly why it, to me, felt not tedious. It was actually fun. What do you guys think of it?
I enjoyed playing it. I don't know that I would ever want to run it because, as I was thinking about it, like in retrospect, since there is not that much randomness involved, and it's more like you were saying, that here's the static number of points that I have in this thing, and I get, X information, and if I want to do something else, I spend some of this finite resource that's not going to come back, at a very fast pace. From the perspective of constructing these story puzzles to work through for a group, it seems like since it's just about static resource management, it's already kind of a foregone conclusion, and maybe that's one of its strengths, where if the DM sets up, X number of difficult things that need to happen that requires, this amount of character resources. And if the characters budget those resources properly, then they are definitely going to succeed at the thing. And I'm not sure how it works, over multiple tests, because we only played it once, but I could see it, I could see that balance being kind of strange, over multiple attempts, where, like, let's say that I designed the adventure badly and the players just literally don't have enough resources at their character's disposal to solve the thing that I need, or on the inverse of that, I make it trivially easy for somebody to just blow through, what the thing is. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you do it just right, yeah, it could be a well-oiled machine that you've created, but I could see where without a lot of preparation, it could get in a weird spot where, like, you can't finish the level. You know what I mean?
The rule book for Nice Black Ages specifically went into that particular case, and explaining how, as the game master, you have a copy, an abbreviated copy of every character's sheet. So I had what everybody's investigative skills were, how many points they had, and as I was creating the adventure, there was actually some tools to help check it off to make sure that you weren't requiring too many points get spent than what the player characters had.
Well, that's cool. I haven't seen any of that. I'd be interested to look at it. Off the top of your head, do you remember how quickly your resources as a character replenish?
Investigative resources refreshed at the end of that adventure or at the end of that investigation, and your combat abilities refreshed each day.
Combat abilities refreshed how often?
Each day.
Okay. So if you have an investigation that goes on for a month, that's just how long it's going to be before you get more investigative resources then?
Yes, but you're supposed to, the goal is to do an investigation a night, or maybe over the course of 2 sessions. Like 1 session or 2 sessions is how long an investigation is generally supposed to last before you get that refresh.
Oh, so is that like, as far as their correspondence with real world time, is that considered to be like 1 game session, like a night or 2 in game, or do they expect a game session to cover multiple investigations, multiple nights of doing stuff?
So it's broken down with a particular investigation is not going to be an entire campaign arc. You're supposed to divide each campaign arc up into several different investigations. Like you guys actually had 2 separate investigations whenever we played. You had all of the stuff that happened while you were in oh crap, now I can't remember what country you were in. You were near Kosovo, weren't you?
Yeah.
No, you were in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I thought it was like Serbia or something.
Yeah, I think you were in Serbia. Like all the stuff that happened in Serbia was 1 investigation, and then all the stuff that happened in Germany was a second investigation. Did
you find that there was more DM prep that you had to do for that system than usual?
Well, it's hard to say because I was kind of running from an established module. I was just kind of adapting some things. The first session that we played was entirely just straight out of a module, and then the second was just kind of extrapolated from that. But the second one, the second session, all the stuff in Germany, that was pretty much on the fly on my part. I knew you guys were in Germany, and I set up some encounters for you to have in Germany, but besides that, everything else was just kind of on the fly. Something that I've read many, many times for advice on how to do basically any type of mystery on the fly is to do a version of the 3-clue rule. And I'll give a brief example of the 3-clue rule. 3-cube rule means that you give 3 different clues that all tie toward the same end conclusion that you want the player characters to go to. For running a on-the-fly mystery, you give the player characters two clues to wrangle with and figure out a conclusion to. And then, regardless of how flawless their plan is or their conclusion is, you look at the clues, look at their solution, and then give them a third clue that contradicts the information that causes the conclusion to be wrong, but the two clues to still remain relevant. Have you guys ever tried anything like that as far as like designing an adventure or designing a mystery?
I have not. I have always just taken like a linear breadcrumb kind of approach, and if I try to budget in when I've done this just a few times. I try to budget in enough information that even if they miss a couple of things along the way, it'll still point them in the general direction. It's been years and years since I tried to do like a complicated mystery, and it seems like it always just blew up in my face for one reason or another. I like the system that you're proposing. I think people get really, really stuck on the false positive clue that you're talking about, though.
Well, in this system, none of them are a false positive. The clues themselves are always true. It's just you give them two clues, they come up with a conclusion, and then you inform them of an additional clue that makes their conclusion wrong, but all of the clues are still accurate.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Have you guys ever watched Poirot?
No, I know what it is, though.
I haven't, but I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with this.
Well, it is probably the best mystery show I have ever seen or heard of. I'm not a huge mystery buff, and I'm definitely not a huge fan of stuff that comes out on like PBS or whatever. But I fucking love Poirot. It's bizarre and quirky for all its own reasons, but just from a writing perspective, I've never seen an episode where I could tell who the murderer or whatever was going to be before the end of it. But then in retrospect, when you piece all the clues together, yeah, that's what it had to be. They don't pull some cheap thing where, there was just like completely hidden information. But it's similar to what you're talking about here. There's way more clues than 3. This is, there's probably 50 clues an episode or something, but it's that same kind of tension that you're talking about, like jerking attention back and forth between suspects and so on. If nobody's seen Poirot, give it a shot. It's weird, and it's not the kind of thing I normally suggest, but it's some of the most well done mystery writing you're ever going to find, I think.
Yeah, that you kind of hit on something that has always been the thing that drives me mad about books and movies and stuff that are labeled as mystery is, although it sounds like this example doesn't do it, you did hit on it, that a lot of them find a way of not giving you all of the information that you need in order to reach the conclusion that is required at the end of the episode. The main character always has something that they know that is a secret until they reveal the conclusion.
Yeah, it's super cheap. If there's no way for anyone to figure it out at some point in the investigation, if it's just like, oh, here's this character no one's ever seen before, it was actually that guy, like, that is weak. That's real bad writing. You should not do it that way. But yeah, I feel like a good mystery is one where at least once, if not more, at some point, if you're looking for like a murderer or something, that murderer should have been a suspect at least once in your gathering of clues, and then you passed him on because of some other information. But that's an engaging dynamic mystery in my mind.
As iconic as Sherlock Holmes is or was, the novels, they are absolutely terrible for going back and, like, at the conclusion of the adventure, Sherlock Holmes is telling you something that only he noticed and that was not actually in the text of this adventure as being told by Watson, that ties everything together in a neat little bow. Like, Holmes himself will have noticed that the first person that walked into the room had like some weird looking clay on his shoes, and that immediately told him who the suspect was. And it is nowhere to be found in the entirety of the story.
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes never misses a perception roll. He gets nat 20s on every single one. And if you're relying on a die to give a critical bit of information to your party, and they get one chance at that roll, it's gonna fuck up.
Yeah, in a system where you have to make a die roll, giving people multiple chances to discover things like that or discover different clues that will lead to the solution, if you're not giving people those multiple chances, you're not doing it right. I mean, you're like that's not to offend any of our listeners, but that's a pretty amateur mistake to be like, well, they didn't get the one roll to discover the one thing they needed, so fuck them.
We've been spending a lot of time talking about like investigation kinds of things. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on a slightly different kind of secret, and that would be like I'm thinking like a Game of Thrones kind of situation, like intrigue kind of stuff, where it's not so much about who did what, but about who can you trust. Like alliances and motives are kind of the secret there. That's slightly different because it's not always the kind of thing that you can pick up a piece of evidence for. Like, all of the evidence might be that, yeah, Littlefinger's a good dude. Like, he's totally trustworthy, but he's not. There's a layer of interaction that involves secrets that is mostly roleplay in nature. Like, yeah, you could do some insight rolls or sense motive, whatever you're using, stuff like that. But for me, whenever I'm playing a character and I'm introduced to someone new, I just by default assume that this person is gonna like have some kind of ulterior motive until proven otherwise. And I assume that other players do the same thing, just because, you know, we've been burned trusting NPCs so many times. But I don't know. What do you guys think about that kind of secret?
I think it's incredibly difficult to pull off, like, especially if you're in a system where there's a binary pass fail, to get that, to have that person pull one over on the players and like not reveal their motivations or something like that. But in systems that are more roleplay, more focused on just the interaction between people rather than the roles themselves, it's a great way to add not only depth to the game, but also complexity to the NPCs that you're playing, to give them different motivations that the players, if they want to, they can go and try to find out, why is it that this person is helping me? Why should I trust Littlefinger? Or should I even trust him? Like, is he doing this something for his own ends? Yes. Okay. But are those ends in alignment with what I want?
We've spoken before on this podcast a couple of times about how weird the social mechanics are to so many games, and you know, because it skates that line between game mechanics and roleplay, and there's not a clear separation between one or the other. But for stuff like this, where there's so much on the line, you want to do it fairly, right? And you don't want to have it all relying on, you know, how good can Clayton portray someone as being trustworthy as Clayton portraying someone versus like dice rolls or whatever. And you want to give players the chance, like maybe that person's just a trusting soul in real life and, you know, isn't always looking for somebody to be duplicitous. But I don't know, it's a tough one for me to wrap my head around, because some of the most interesting stories come out of that kind of tension of, you know, who's keeping what secrets. But how do you not just fuck over your whole group? Because you could very easily, as a DM, just be like, oh yeah, this dude's totally trustworthy. He seems like someone you should listen to, you know?
I think one of the keys to that is just being varied but also judicious in how you present the NPCs. Like you just said that you see every NPC as only looking out for number one, not ever, like always, not only looking out for number one, but wanting to fuck over the players if that means getting their goal. And there's a variety of people in the real world who, yeah, they want what's best for them, but they might not be willing to just completely burn everything around them if it means them getting a leg up. So, if you can present enough NPCs that are varied enough in their motivations that the players don't know whether they can trust, this person to fuck them over later, then the players are going to be better at, are going to be more engaged with the game if they don't believe that everybody is just going to fuck them, because the fun will be in learning, okay, this person we trusted and he didn't screw us over. Should we trust this next person? And then you start a dialogue where later on you can start bringing in these bad seeds that are going to screw them over. And it's very much like the, like conditioning the players to where, most of the stuff that's happening is good, but the bad is going to be really bad. So are you conditioning them to trust people, or are you so conditioning them to the bad that they're going to avoid all of the good as well, just to avoid the bad?
We could do an entire episode on conditioning your players, I think.
That would be a great one. I think that this kind of game, where the NPC's intentions are part of the mystery that you're trying to solve, is probably one of the most difficult kinds of games you can possibly run. Because it's easy to plan from session 1 to final session, some extended dungeon crawl or something, room by room, whatever. But this is so dynamic that, aside from like really gigantic forces in the world around the players, there's nothing that you can really count on going one way or the other. If you're in one of these role play heavy, sort of intuition based kinds of games, even session to session, you can know what your NPCs designs are going to be, what they're scheming, but how the players interact with that on the fly, and when some player decides, all right, now I'm gonna let it all out right in the middle of the court, and blah blah blah, like everything could go off the rails at any moment. So I don't know,
I think that you can do that where everything is in flux like that and constantly changing, but you have to give the NPCs concrete, set in stone, never changing motivations. Like if you're playing a vampire game, the Primogen is absolutely wanting to become the next prince. That is a core part of their character, and that is a motivation that the players can learn, and that is something that will always influence every machination that they have. And the players know it, and then you end up giving the players the choice of, well, we know this guy is going to use this in order to try to become the prince of the city. Is that a deal with the devil that we're willing to do?
Yeah, and I think more than a lot of other kinds of games, this kind of game specifically, a DM needs to have a very intimate knowledge of each one of their main NPCs that are going to be kind of the movers and shakers, and you have to be prepared for every single session at the end of it to completely refactor everything that you had in mind based on what just happened in the last session. Everybody's going to be making a counter move relative to what just occurred, and I guess what you're saying, Clayton, is that you should limit the range of growth or change of the NPCs so as to minimize the amount of variables in the story. Like maybe you might have one villain that has like some interesting character arc, but most of the NPCs along the way are going to be fairly static in their personalities. Is that what you're saying?
Very much. You're going to drive yourself mad if you try to give every NPC as deep and dynamic a motivation and backstory and personality as what a player character has. And at worst, it's just going to come across as being inconsistent. Like if you know that that one particular character or one particular NPC loves another PC or NPC, and you know that they're never going to harm them, that is a secret that your characters know, and that is something that you can use to your advantage, whether it is nefarious or beneficial. It is something that your characters can count on using to predict how that NPC is going to act and react to the world around them. So can we talk a little bit about red herrings?
Let's do it.
I fucking hate them. I want to clarify what I mean by a red herring. Red herrings, if you're not aware, are things that are false clues. They're false starts. They're lies. And red herrings, I feel, particularly in a role-playing game, do nothing to enhance the game. At best, the players are just going to waste time with a red herring, and at worst, the player characters are going to start acting like a bulldog with its bone with that red herring, only this bulldog has obsessive compulsive disorder, and it is focused on the bone, and it will not let go of the bone, and it will fucking bite you if you try to take away the bone.
What is the origin of the red herring that you're talking about? Is this something that the DM has written in as just a coincidence that would easily lend itself to a misinterpretation on the part of the PCs? Or is this a intentional covering of tracks by a villain to throw the party off the scent?
This would be an intentional, or this would be a coincidence is a good example of this, and a coincidence that has nothing to do with what is going on, but it is presented in a way that it has as much weight and relevance as every clue that the player characters have gained at this point. If an NPC is trying to cover up their tracks like you're describing, there should be something in this red herring that tells them, that eventually turns it around and gets them to look at the person who planted the red herring. I feel like if it's just there to throw them off and it doesn't give them any actual information about what they're doing, it's just there to fuck them over, I don't think you should use it in a role-playing game.
Anybody would find that fun. I don't know. I've heard this red herring idea more lampooned than, taken seriously. I don't know why it exists as a literary device.
There is another form of a red herring that crops up in role-playing games, and this is more insidious in the way it disrupts the game because it is completely accidental. It is not intended by the game master at all. For instance, it's an extension of the game master presenting an NPC who all of the characters just fall in love with and become focused on that NPC, and it becomes their best friend, and it becomes the entire focus of the campaign. There are times when the game master may say something, and in just giving a description of an area, and the player characters attach way too much importance to it. They think it is a clue when it is not intended to be anything like that.
I think it's perfectly legit as a DM if you detect something like that emerging from your descriptions and the player interactions and whatever. If they're clearly starting to home in on completely the wrong thing and it's going to fuck with your game, I think it's totally legit to be like, listen guys, this is not what you think it is. You're barking up the wrong tree here. Let's move on,
Absolutely. Or if that's not an option, if you don't think that they would take well to that, if your adventure is malleable enough, maybe that inconsequential detail, maybe it does suddenly become relevant, because players love nothing more than to sit around and speculate about what is going on. And this is another case where you as the game master can just sit there, listen, and kind of write in the margins of your adventure, oh, well, this is how everything ties together now with this new thing that wasn't a clue to begin with, but they've found a way of weaving it in that is actually interesting.
Haha, you've seen through my clever ruse.
Yeah, that ties in really well with something we've said before about, your players' ideas are often the best ones, and even if you weren't planning that thing they've speculated, maybe you should start planning it now or adopting it.
It really hurts my soul to think about that from a player perspective, though, because when I'm in a game where there's some mystery going on, I'm just really hoping that there's a consistent world that exists in the DM's head that I'm playing within. Otherwise, I feel like all of my efforts are, it's like you're just swimming in Jell-O or something, there's nothing like really real about anything that I'm doing here, and so that kind of undermines any consequences to anything. That it all seems just kind of wishy-washy and hand-wavy. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't think the game master should ever tell the players when they've been doing something on the fly or off the cuff. I don't think you should tell them.
Yeah, preserve that fragile image of a well-crafted world that they have towards your world at all costs.
So are we ready to move on to geek things?
Every time we get to this point in a podcast, I always think, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about this, and then I know for a fact in 15 or 20 minutes I'm going to have 5 more things that I want to say.
Imagine editing an entire episode and then thinking of all the great things that you could add.
Yep. I guess that's why we keep podcasting.
Yeah, eventually we'll get it all out there. So I'll go first for a geek thing. I've recently been doing a lot of research on the Spelljammer campaign setting, and I stumbled upon a YouTube channel, AJ Pickett. He does a series on Dungeons and Dragons lore. It is updated twice a week, and this guy has been doing it for at least 4 years. He goes into depth about the lore behind the different races, classes, monsters, campaign settings, locations, magical items, anything and everything in D&D that has a capital name on it. He'll probably end up doing a 10 to 20 minute YouTube video on that topic.
Nice.
That's the only one I've got. Kyle, do you have any?
Well, I finally got around to watching some more Picard. But we've already talked about that. Honestly, I haven't been consuming a lot of new media or other geeky things.
I've got 2 things. One of them is it's a Netflix TV series called Kingdom. It's a South Korean series that is set in feudal Korea, I guess, during a fairly interesting zombie outbreak kind of thing. It's a lot of court intrigue and cool stuff like that, and it's fairly realistic as far as the combat and everything. Don't think some kind of crazy kung fu, crouching tiger, hidden dragon kind of thing. No one's running up a wall or any of that. It's much closer to a Game of Thrones kind of realism, I would say. Maybe even more so. But it's really, really good. I definitely suggest it. It's got 2 seasons, 12 episodes altogether. So that's cool. Check that out. The other thing, if we have any listeners that are gun nuts, I just found my new favorite weapon. There's this thing called the X-Tar EP9. It's a $400 9mm firearm that is tiny and technically a pistol, though it's closer to a submachine gun, though it is semi-automatic. I don't know if anybody knows this, but it seems like the ATF is sort of their own legislative body within the executive branch, in a weird way. All of our current gun laws kind of stem out of the National Firearms Act from 1934, which was originally passed as a kind of an answer to the old school Chicago Mafia, the first ever drive-bys with Tommy guns and all that kind of thing. So this is why you have to pay all this extra money and go through all this paperwork for things like silencers and machine guns and whatever. But they just kind of change their interpretation of the law every couple of years. So new things become legal, other things become illegal. It's crazy. And this is like the force of like 10-year felony charge kind of stuff that is in play here. But anyway, they recently changed a ruling where these arm braces that you can put on a pistol that for all intents and purposes are a stock, which would have classified it as a short barrel rifle, something that is a controlled type of weapon for concealability purposes, is now in fact just a regular old firearm that anybody can buy off the shelf. So there's a whole bunch of really cool ones out there. If you're into guns, check it out. They're kind of amazing. Yeah, that's what I got for now.
All right, guys, what do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice? And I insert the sound of digital dice rolling.
Clatter, 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 clatter.
Do digital dice make a sound?
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.